The team stood before the glowing portal. The hum of energy resonated in the air as the blue light flickered and rippled like water disturbed by an unseen force. For weeks they had worked tirelessly deciphering the strange data from their satellite observations, but nothing had prepared them for what lay ahead beneath the Earth's surface in the deep shadows of an ancient underground facility. Their mission had started as a routine scientific inquiry, but now as they gazed at the swirling vortex before them, they were standing on the precipice of something far more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined. The team leader, Emily Turner, stared at the portal with wide eyes, her fingers trembling ever so slightly on the controls as she turned to the others, standing beside her, all equally captivated and uncertain. "We've come this far," she thought. "There's no turning back now." Behind her, her team members whispered in awe. "What is this place? What could it be?" Turner held up her hand to silence the chatter, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. "All right, everyone, we've checked the readings twice. This portal is stable, but we don't know where it leads or what's on the other side." A sharp intake of breath came from one of the younger scientists, Matthew, who had been eagerly studying the ancient texts they'd found in the facility's ruins. "It's like something out of a science fiction novel," he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "But there's no denying it, this thing is real." Turner nodded grimly, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her shoulders. "There's only one way to find out what's on the other side, and that's to send someone through." The group went silent at that simple declaration, but in that silence hung the gravity of the decision they had to make. Everyone had signed up for the research expedition, but now, standing on the brink of something that could change everything, they were all keenly aware that this wasn't just a discovery, it was a gamble. "We'll need to proceed with extreme caution," Turner continued. "There's no telling what we might encounter or what dangers await us." She turned to the team's security officer, Captain Jason Hayes, who was examining the portal's edges warily, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. "I'll go first," he said flatly, drawing the eyes of the group, his expression unreadable. "What, Jason? No way!" Emily started to protest, but he raised a hand, cutting her off. "It's the logical choice. As lead security, I'm the most prepared to handle any danger that might come through." There was no arguing with that. Emily's mind raced as she processed the decision. It was a gamble, but Jason had experience, and if anyone was ready to step into the unknown, it was him. With a deep breath, she nodded. "All right, Jason, you're up, but we stay in contact at all times." The team made their final preparations as Jason stepped closer to the glowing portal, its light growing brighter as he approached. His heart pounded, but he steadied his breath and gripped his gear tightly. "Here goes nothing," he muttered under his breath before stepping through. The others watched as his figure was swallowed by the light, disappearing into the unknown. Minutes passed, and in that silence there was a collective holding of breath. Had he made it through? Was he lost to them forever? Then the comms crackled to life. "I'm through." It was Jason's voice, though it sounded strange, distorted by the other side of the portal. But it was unmistakable. He was alive, and the adventure had only just begun. The team waited anxiously for any sign as the seconds stretched into minutes, Jason's voice still crackling through the comms, but growing fainter and more distorted with each passing moment. Turner's fingers gripped the edge of the console, her eyes locked on the portal, as if willing it to provide answers, but the swirling energy remained an unyielding mystery. Then a faint voice broke through the static. "I'm here," he said, his voice a rasp and filled with awe. Everyone leaned in closer to the speakers, waiting for him to explain what he saw. It's like nothing I've ever seen," Jason continued. "There's a sky here, but it's different. The clouds aren't like ours, and the air feels heavier." His voice faltered for a moment, as if unsure of how to continue. "There's a kind of tension in the air, like something is watching me. I don't know how to describe it, but it's unnerving." The team exchanged uneasy glances, but Emily knew better than to let fear cloud their judgment. They had come this far, and they couldn't turn back now. "Jason, do you see any signs of life?" she asked, keeping her voice calm. "There's movement ahead of me, something large. It's hard to see clearly with the haze in the air, but I think it's some kind of creature. It doesn't look like anything I've ever seen." Everyone's breath caught at the mention of an unknown creature, but Emily remained focused. "Keep your distance from it, Jason. Are there any signs of civilization structures?" "I don't see any buildings, but the terrain is strange. Rock formations unlike anything we've studied before. It's like the landscape was shaped by something otherworldly." His voice crackled again. "And the colors, Emily, the colors here are all wrong. Nothing looks like it's supposed to be here." The team was silent for a moment, each member processing what Jason had said about the environment and the unsettling feeling that seemed to hang in the air. "We need to send a second team through," Emily said finally, her voice steady, but there was no hiding the concern in her eyes. She looked at her team. "The portal is stable, but we don't know what we're dealing with over there." "Captain Hayes, do you think you can explore safely and find out more about your surroundings before we follow you through?" she asked. Jason hesitated for a long time, but eventually answered, "I'll keep moving forward, but we'll need backup soon. I don't know how long I can stay isolated like this. There's something out here, it doesn't feel right." The unease in his voice was enough to rattle the entire team, but they couldn't afford to waste time. Emily's heart pounded, but she had no choice. "All right, we'll be right behind you," she said, nodding to the team to begin preparations. They worked quickly, assembling a second team equipped with survival gear and weapons in the corner of the room. Maya checked her equipment, once more making sure everything was in working order, while Jason's last message echoed in her mind. Something out there didn't feel right. But this wasn't the time to back down. They had come this far, and they had to know what lay beyond the portal, no matter what dangers awaited them. Emily's hand hovered over the console as she glanced back at the rest of the team. "You're with me, everyone. Keep your comms on, and stay sharp." With one last look at the portal, Emily steeled herself for the journey ahead. Then, without another word, she stepped through the gateway. The coldness of the strange air hit her first, followed by the sudden weight of the world around her. This wasn't Earth. This was something else entirely. The moment Emily stepped through the portal, the air felt thick, charged with a strange energy that pressed against her skin. The ground beneath her boots was soft, almost sponge-like, and the sky above stretched in unnatural hues of purple and teal. She couldn't shake the feeling that the very atmosphere around her was alive, watching, waiting. Her team followed closely behind, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the odd texture of the ground. They all paused briefly, adjusting to the foreign landscape, eyes wide in awe and wariness. The trees, if they could be called that, towered far above them, their bark-like structures shimmering in the dim light. Strange, bioluminescent plants bloomed in clusters along the path, casting an eerie glow that only deepened the surreal atmosphere. Emily took a deep breath, her mind racing. This was unlike anything she had ever seen, and yet, despite the overwhelming strangeness, there was a sense of undeniable beauty in the environment. But there was also something unsettling, something in the way the land seemed to pulse, as if the very earth beneath their feet was alive. "Stay focused," Emily told herself. As the team ventured further into the unknown world, the sounds of the jungle seemed to grow louder. Whispers of movement from unseen creatures, the rustle of foliage disturbed by something large. Emily motioned for the team to stop, raising her hand in a signal to be quiet. They all froze, listening intently to the growing noise around them. It came from ahead. Something was approaching, moving fast. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and decay. A shadow moved among the glowing plants, large and lumbering, its shape hard to define. "What the hell is that?" Maya whispered, her eyes darting nervously from side to side. Then the creature emerged, a hulking mass of sinewy limbs, its dark body covered in a smooth armor-like exoskeleton. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its mouth was lined with rows of sharp teeth. It moved with surprising grace for its size, its head swiveling from side to side, sniffing the air. It was massive, easily 10 feet tall, and as it looked toward the team, a low growl rumbled from deep within its throat. The creature seemed to consider them for a moment, then began to move closer, its body swaying with an eerie rhythm. "Get back," Emily ordered, her voice barely above a whisper. Slowly, the team began to retreat, taking careful steps backward. Their eyes never left the creature, which followed their movements with an unsettling intensity. "What is it doing here?" Jason's voice crackled through the comms, still coming from the distance, but close enough to hear the tension in his words. Emily didn't answer immediately. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of this world that seemed so alive, so alien. They were intruders here, and it was becoming increasingly clear that they weren't welcome. As they backed away, a faint noise from behind them made Emily's blood run cold. Another creature, smaller but no less threatening, emerged from the shadows. It moved in a blur, darting out from behind a cluster of bioluminescent plants, its body sleek and muscular, with glowing eyes that pierced the darkness. It made no sound as it advanced, moving with a predatory silence. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. There was no way they were getting out of this without a fight. She reached for her weapon, but it was too late. The smaller creature lunged, its claws flashing like steel. Then, just as quickly, a sharp burst of energy rang through the air. The creature was struck mid-lunge, its body exploding in a flash of light. Emily turned to see Jason emerging from the shadows, his weapon still glowing faintly from the shot. "Get down," he ordered, and in an instant, he was beside them, scanning the surrounding area. The larger creature, now aware of the new threat, gave a guttural roar and charged, but Jason was already moving, firing another shot. This one hit the creature in the shoulder, causing it to stagger back. "It's not going down that easily," Jason warned. "We need to retreat. Now." Without waiting for a response, Emily signaled to the team, and they began moving in the opposite direction, hearts pounding. The jungle was alive with danger, and every step forward felt like another step into the unknown. As they sprinted, the creature howled behind them, its footsteps shaking the ground beneath their feet. "We need to find shelter," Emily thought. Fast. They pushed on, not looking back, knowing that the true nature of this world was just beginning to reveal itself. The team ran through the dense jungle, pushing their way past strange, glowing plants and jagged rock formations that seemed to shift as they moved. The sound of the creature's pursuit was unmistakable, the heavy thud of its footsteps growing ever closer. Emily's heart raced in her chest as she scanned the surroundings, desperate for any sign of shelter or escape. Jason took point, leading the way through the maze of unfamiliar terrain. His weapon was raised, ready to fire at the next sign of danger. Emily followed closely, keeping an eye on the rest of the team, who were struggling to keep up in the thick undergrowth. "We can't outrun it," she thought. "We need a plan, and fast." Ahead, she spotted a small opening between two towering rocks, a narrow passage that seemed to lead into a darkened cavern. It wasn't much, but it might provide the team with a chance to regroup. "There," Emily shouted, pointing to the passage. "Move." Without hesitation, they sprinted toward the narrow opening, their footsteps pounding against the soft, damp ground. Behind them, the creature's growls grew louder, and the air vibrated with the force of its pursuit. They reached the entrance just in time. As Emily ducked into the darkened cavern, she felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. The atmosphere here was different, cooler, with an odd resonance that seemed to hum through the walls. It was as though the cave itself was alive, pulsing with an ancient energy. The team huddled together, panting, their bodies pressed against the rough stone of the cavern. Emily's mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. They had barely escaped the creature's claws, but it was still out there, and they had no idea what other dangers this world held. Jason turned to her, his expression tense. "What now?" Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "We need to figure out what this place is," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If we're going to survive here, we have to understand what we're dealing with." Maya spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. "What do you mean?" "We've seen the creatures, the strange plants, but we still don't know anything about why we're here or what this place is." Is it another Earth? A parallel world? Emily frowned, rubbing her forehead. That's what I'm trying to figure out. The portal, it's not just a door to another world. It's more like a gateway, a link to multiple realities. We've only scratched the surface, but something tells me that the Tarkari, the alien race we've read about, are tied to all of this. Sarkari, Jason echoed, his brow furrowing. The invaders? Yes, Emily nodded. We've seen signs of their influence in the ancient ruins we explored. I think they've been using these portals to invade other worlds, and we've stumbled right into their path. There was a long pause as the team absorbed her words. It wasn't much of a revelation. They had known they were dealing with something far bigger than a simple alternate world. But hearing the words out loud made the gravity of the situation hit home. We need to find out more about the ruins, Maya said, her voice determined. If we can understand what happened to the people here, maybe we'll figure out how to fight back. Emily agreed, nodding. We're not just visitors here, she said. We're part of something much larger. And I'm willing to bet the Tarkari will be coming after us soon. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their reality. As the team rested in the cavern, trying to catch their breath, Emily's mind continued to race. The portal wasn't just a doorway to another world. It was the key to an entire web of dimensions, a vast and dangerous network that connected countless realities. And somewhere, deep within the chaos of this unknown world, they had to find the answers before the Tarkari found them first. Emily's hand hovered over the device on her wrist, the communication link that would allow them to contact Earth. It was still working, but there was no telling for how long. They had to move quickly. We need to get to the ruins, she said, her voice firm. That's our next step. Let's go. The team stood up, preparing to leave the relative safety of the cavern. They knew the journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but there was no turning back. The only way out was forward, into the heart of the unknown. With a final glance at the dark passage they had just come through, Emily led her team back into the jungle, their footsteps silent but determined as they ventured deeper into the mysteries of this alien world. The jungle seemed to shift around them as the team pressed on, the once dense canopy opening up into a vast expanse of open ground. The strange bioluminescent plants were fewer here, replaced by tall, skeletal trees that towered over them, their branches reaching toward the sky like twisted fingers. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the ground, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They moved cautiously, their steps quiet but deliberate. The temperature had dropped, and the air felt denser, as if something was pressing down on them from above. Emily glanced at her team, noting the worried looks on their faces. They were all aware of the danger that still lingered around them, the creatures that stalked in the shadows, the sense of unease that weighed heavily on their shoulders. What's that? Maya's voice broke the silence, her eyes narrowing as she pointed ahead. In the distance, faint outlines of structures began to emerge from the fog-like mist that rolled across the ground. The stone pillars that rose from the earth were covered in strange symbols, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as they looked at them. It was the same kind of architecture they had seen in the ancient ruins earlier, but this was different. It was far more intact, and the design seemed more advanced, alien, even. We found something, Emily said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and caution. Stay sharp, everyone. They approached the structures slowly, the hum in the air growing louder with each step. It was as though the very ground beneath their feet resonated with the energy of the place. The closer they got, the more Emily could feel the weight of the atmosphere pressing in on her. The air seemed to vibrate with an unseen power, and the symbols on the stones pulsed in time with the rhythmic hum. Do you think the Tarkari built this? Jason asked, his voice low and filled with suspicion. It's possible, Emily replied, her mind racing. But there's something more to this place, something ancient. The Tarkari didn't just invade. They may have discovered this place long ago and tried to harness its power. She stepped closer to one of the stone pillars, tracing the alien symbols with her fingers. There was a strange warmth beneath her touch, a subtle energy that seemed to flow through the stone and into her skin. A shiver ran down her spine, and she quickly pulled her hand away. "We need to be careful," she warned the team. "This place is alive in some way. I can feel it." The rest of the team nodded, and they continued to move deeper into the complex, their eyes scanning every corner, every crevice, for any signs of movement or danger. The structures seemed to grow more elaborate the further they went, some towering like obelisks, others resembling massive arches that spanned the distance between two peaks. As they reached the center of the complex, Emily stopped. Before them stood a massive structure, a pyramid, its surface smooth and unbroken, yet covered in the same shifting symbols that adorned the pillars. It was taller than anything they had seen, its peak lost in the mist above. There was an almost magnetic pull to it, drawing Emily and the others closer. "This is it," she thought. "This is what we've been searching for." But as they moved toward the pyramid's base, a sudden deafening roar echoed through the air, reverberating off the stone walls. The ground trembled beneath their feet as something massive shifted in the distance. They weren't alone. Something was coming. The roar was followed by the sound of heavy footsteps, pounding against the earth with terrifying force. And then, from the mist, a shape emerged, a figure so massive it dwarfed everything around it. It was a creature, unlike anything they had seen before. Its body was covered in spiked armor, its limbs thick and muscular, and its eyes glowed with a fiery intensity. Its massive jaws were lined with jagged teeth, and a trail of smoke curled from its nostrils as it lumbered forward, its eyes fixed on the intruders. "We need to move," Jason said, his voice urgent. Emily didn't need any more convincing. The team turned, racing back toward the entrance of the complex, their hearts pounding in their chests. The massive creature behind them let out another roar, shaking the ground as it gave chase. The jungle had just become their hunting ground, and they were the prey. The sound of the creature's pursuit was deafening, each heavy footfall sending shockwaves through the ground. Emily's pulse raced as she sprinted, pushing herself harder than ever. The team was close behind, but the massive creature was relentless, its growls echoing through the dense air, reverberating off the stone walls of the complex. Every breath felt like it could be their last as they dashed for the entrance. Jason led the way, his weapon raised, but he knew that even with the most advanced technology, their chances of surviving an encounter with this thing were slim. They needed distance. Fast. "Keep running," Jason shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to find cover before it catches up." Emily's thoughts raced as they weaved through the stone pillars, the jungle ahead seeming to stretch endlessly. But no matter how fast they ran, it felt as though the creature was right on their heels. The ground beneath them trembled with each of its movements, and the air grew thicker with every second they spent in its path. "I can't keep this up," Maya gasped, her breathing heavy as she stumbled over a loose stone. "We're almost there," Emily urged, glancing over her shoulder to see the creature gaining ground. It was only a matter of time before it caught them if they didn't act. Ahead, a large rock formation jutted out from the earth, forming a natural barrier. It wasn't much, but it could provide enough cover to regroup. Emily saw it too and veered toward the rocks, motioning for the others to follow. As they reached the formation, they ducked behind it, trying to catch their breath, their hearts hammering in their chests. The creature's massive form loomed in the distance, its glowing eyes scanning the area, sniffing the air. Emily could see the steam rising from its nostrils, a sure sign of its anger. It was still too close. The team had no choice but to move quickly and make a plan. Jason turned to Emily, his expression grim. "That thing's not going to stop. We have to fight or get out of here, one way or another." Emily nodded, her mind racing. "We don't have the firepower to take it down, not with just our weapons. But there might be something here in this complex that could help, if we can just find a way to use the environment to our advantage." Before she could finish her thought, a deep rumble echoed from the direction of the pyramid. The ground beneath them shook again, but this time it was different, less like the creature's footsteps, more like something enormous shifting. The sound grew louder, and the air felt heavier, as though the very earth was waking up. "What's happening?" Maya whispered, her voice trembling. Emily's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. The structure, they had awakened something. Whatever force had powered the pyramid was now stirring, and it seemed to be responding to the presence of the creature. "It's the pyramid," Emily said, her voice urgent. "It's reacting to the creature. This might be our chance." They didn't have much time. The creature was closing in, and the vibrations in the ground were growing stronger with each passing second. Emily scanned the rocky formation for an exit, but their options were limited. "We have to get to the pyramid," she said, pushing herself to her feet. "It's our only shot at survival." "But Emily," Jason hesitated, his face twisted in doubt. "What if the pyramid is even more dangerous?" "We don't have a choice," Emily snapped, her eyes fierce. "If we stay here, it'll kill us. If we reach the pyramid, we might be able to control whatever power it has, or at least use it to stop the creature." Without waiting for another word, Emily took off toward the pyramid, the others close behind. The creature roared again, its massive form now charging toward them. But the closer they got to the pyramid, the more the ground began to tremble, the hum of energy from the structure growing louder and more intense. It was as if the entire complex was alive, responding to their presence and to the threat bearing down on them. Emily had no idea what was waiting for them at the pyramid, but she knew they had no other choice. Whatever it was their only hope. As they reached the base of the structure, the ground shook violently, and for a moment, the world seemed to go dark. The pyramid began to glow, its surface flashing with brilliant light, and the air around them crackled with energy. The battle for survival was just beginning. The moment Emily and her team reached the base of the pyramid, a surge of energy pulsed through the air, rattling their bones and making the hairs on their skin stand on end. The pyramid, once seemingly inert, now hummed with a powerful vibration that reverberated through the ground beneath their feet. Emily could feel the electricity in the air, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Behind them, the creature's footsteps grew louder, each thud of its massive body drawing closer. But now, as they stood before the glowing pyramid, the ground seemed to shift. The stones of the structure began to rearrange themselves, slowly rising like living things, forming steps and ramps that led upward. "It's opening," Maya whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. The pyramid's surface shimmered, and Emily realized that the energy wasn't just a light show. It was a doorway, an entry point into something far deeper, far more ancient than they had anticipated. The question now wasn't whether they should enter. It was whether they had any other choice. They didn't have much time. Emily turned to the team, her voice resolute. "We're going inside. Now, keep moving and stay together." Without another word, they began to climb the steps that had materialized, the strange hum of the pyramid filling their ears. Each step felt like they were being drawn closer to something beyond their understanding. The air was colder here, and the ground beneath them felt strangely alive, as though the pyramid itself was feeding on their presence. The creature was still coming, its growls now a terrifying reminder of how close death was. It was almost upon them. "Hurry," Jason barked, his eyes frantic as he looked over his shoulder. The team pushed on, climbing faster, driven by the knowledge that this might be their only escape. As they reached the top of the pyramid, Emily's heart skipped a beat. The opening before them was like nothing she had ever seen, an iridescent portal, swirling with colors that shifted and changed with every passing second. The energy emanating from it was magnetic, pulling them in, making them feel as if they were being absorbed into the very fabric of reality itself. "There's no turning back," Emily thought, glancing at the team. "This is it." She didn't hesitate. With a sharp motion, she stepped forward into the portal, followed closely by Jason, Maya, and the others. The moment they passed through, the world around them warped in a dizzying blur of light and sound. It felt as if they were falling and floating at the same time, their bodies twisted and stretched by the force of the portal. The journey seemed to last forever, and just when Emily thought she might lose herself to the overwhelming sensation, the world snapped back into focus. The ground beneath her feet was solid again, and she stumbled as she regained her balance. The air was different here, crisp and dry, with a faint smell of burning metal and ozone. She looked around, her breath catching in her throat. They were no longer in the jungle or at the pyramid. Instead, they stood on a wide, barren plain that stretched out in every direction. The sky above them was a sickly shade of red, and the landscape was dotted with jagged rocks and craters that seemed to go on forever. In the distance, massive spires of black stone rose from the ground like twisted fingers reaching for the heavens. This isn't just another world, Emily thought, her mind racing. This is something entirely different, a place between places, a dimension in itself. And the worst part was, they were not alone. In the distance, shapes began to move, figures emerging from the shadows. They were tall, humanoid, their forms cloaked in dark robes that billowed in the strange wind. Their eyes glowed with an eerie green light, and as they drew closer, Emily felt a chill crawl up her spine. The Tarkari. They had arrived. We're not safe yet, Emily realized, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. But something told her that these beings weren't just after them. They were after something much larger, something that lay hidden in this strange, hostile world. The Tarkari were watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. But Emily and her team weren't going to go down without a fight. This was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. The figures moved toward them with deliberate slowness, their eerie green eyes fixed on Emily and her team. The Tarkari, the invaders who had been hunting them through the portal, had finally arrived. Their long, shadowed forms seemed to shimmer in the strange red light of the sky, and every step they took sent waves of unease through the air. Emily could feel the oppressive weight of their presence, like a dark storm closing in. "What do they want?" Jason whispered, his hand tightening around his weapon. Emily didn't answer immediately. She was too busy scanning the landscape, looking for any hint of an escape or a means of defense. But there was nothing, just the barren expanse stretching endlessly in every direction, broken only by the jagged rocks and those foreboding black spires in the distance. It was as if they had entered a place that existed outside time and space, a realm of pure hostility. "We need to get out of here," Maya said urgently, her voice strained. "There's nowhere to hide." Emily turned to face her, her mind racing. She knew they couldn't outrun the Tarkari, not in this unfamiliar dimension. But there had to be something they could use, some way to fight back. Just as she was about to speak, a low rumble echoed across the plain, followed by a crackling sound that seemed to come from the very air around them. The sky above them flickered, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Emily glanced up, her eyes widening in realization. They weren't the only ones here. "The pyramid," Emily exclaimed, pointing toward the distant horizon. "The structure. They must have triggered something when we arrived. It's calling them." As if to confirm her words, a massive flash of light erupted from the direction of the pyramid. The Tarkari halted in their tracks, their glowing eyes flickering with an unsettling awareness. Their heads tilted as if listening to some unseen command, and then, in a synchronized motion, they began to move toward the source of the light. "They're going to the pyramid," Jason muttered. "But why? What's there?" Emily's mind spun. The pyramid, this entire dimension, wasn't just a random place. It was a tool, a weapon, or perhaps a key. And the Tarkari, for all their power, were being drawn toward it. The energy they had awakened, the power they had sensed in the ruins earlier, it was all coming to a head. The Tarkari were trying to harness it. "We need to follow them," Emily said, her voice hardening with resolve. "If they reach that pyramid before we do, we'll lose any chance of surviving this." Without waiting for a response, She turned and ran, pushing herself through the jagged terrain. The team followed, their breaths ragged but determined, as they kept pace with her. Every step they took felt heavier, as if the very ground beneath their feet was trying to pull them down into the depths of the dimension itself. Behind them, the Tsarkari moved with unnerving speed, their eyes locked on the glowing beacon in the distance. But despite their relentless pursuit, Emily and her team couldn't afford to stop. The pyramid was their last hope, the only place where they could find answers, or perhaps even a way to escape. The sky above them darkened, a deep shadow stretching over the plain as they neared the pyramid. The Tsarkari were closing in, their forms towering over the team as they advanced in perfect unison. Emily could feel the heat of the energy in the air now, a crackling tension that made every fiber of her being alert, ready for whatever came next. They reached the base of the pyramid just as the Tsarkari arrived, their figures casting long, menacing shadows across the ground. Emily stepped forward, her heart pounding, her hands trembling but steady as she gripped her weapon. The pyramid's light seemed to pulse, now responding to their presence, as if it knew they were about to make their final stand. The Tsarkari halted at the edge of the glowing structure, their eerie green eyes flickering in the darkness. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then one of the Tsarkari spoke, its voice deep and resonant, filling the air with an unsettling force. "You've come too late," it said. "This world will be ours." Emily's pulse quickened, but she didn't back down. She stepped forward, her voice steady as she spoke. "We're not giving up. Not now. Not ever." The Tsarkari leader's eyes narrowed, its lips curling into something resembling a smile. Then, with a wave of its hand, the ground beneath them cracked open. The battle for survival was not over. It had only just begun.